So in a time when millions and millions of people want answers and need help, they are asking Congress and asking the US government for assistance. This comes from other countries, but this also comes from within. Right now, millions of people are struggling. We know the middle class households here in the United States are struggling because of inflation. They are struggling to put food on the table, pay for medication, keep a home, and fuel their vehicles. Well, what is the US government going to do about this? Are we going to see things become easier, or are they going to be harder? Well, they're going to be harder for a certain group of people because we do know that people on Social Security, those with disabilities, are going to struggle. And lawmakers know it's because of the shortcomings that they have been getting over the past few years. Many people on disability, people on a fixed income, those on Social Security, the elderly, are struggling because they don't have the assistance that is needed. Now, here's what I can tell you. Even though there's a lot of questions surrounding Social Security, the US government, things going on in Israel and Ukraine, what many people are really looking into is, what is Congress going to do? Well, we actually have some answers because now we know what lawmakers are planning to do. And I want to show you this. This is actually from The Hill from this morning. It says, this is from Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and Speaker Mike Johnson, headed for a shutdown clash over Ukraine. Well, what exactly does this mean? Well, what it means is these two people are fighting over where should the money go and how much money should it be. What we do know is that Speaker Mike Johnson, the new speaker, he vows to move $14.5 billion Israel aid package, which is going to set up a showdown with the Senate. Well, how's he going to move it? What's he going to do with it? Well, here's what he had to say. He says, we're going to move a standalone Israel funding bill this week in the House. I know my colleagues, our Republican colleagues in the Senate, have a similar measure. We believe that this is a pressing and urgent need. There are lots of things going on around the world that we have to address, and we will. But right now, what's happening in Israel takes the immediate attention, and I think we have got to separate that and get it through. So what he's planning to separate is he's planning to separate the $14.5 billion going to Israel with the $60 billion that is supposed to go to Ukraine. The reason why they want to separate the two, or what he says is to bifurcate, which means to pretty much pull apart. He wants to separate the two things because he says one is going to have a lot of issues, and that is sending money to Ukraine, an additional $60 billion. What Republicans are asking for is for us to help out Israel, be patient with Ukraine, just wait, because we don't have all this extra money that we can just go and send people, just send other countries. And I bring up Social Security, I bring up SNAP benefits, I bring up the elderly, because according to reports, we are likely going to have additional issues when it comes to the government funding bill. Not Ukraine, not Israel, the government funding bill, which has to pass by November 17th. Well, look at this. It says Speaker Johnson suggests he's open to a short-term stopgap government funding measure until January 15th. Well, that's better than going to November 17th, right? Well, here's what he had to say. He says, I've talked with my colleagues about this in the race for the speaker. I mentioned that I would favor, as for purposes of discussion, to building census around if there indeed has to be a stopgap funding measure, that we would do that until January 15th. And the reason for that is it gets us beyond the end of the year push. And oftentimes the Senate tries to jam the House and force an omnibus spending bill. We're not doing that here anymore. We're having single subject bills in our separate appropriations bills, And so pushing that into January, I think, would assist us in the endeavor. The key word in all of this is we are not going to do that here anymore. Okay? There is no more omnibus bill. They are not going to do that. So what does this mean? Well, here's why I bring up SNAP benefits, Social Security, anything for the elderly, is because, and I'll throw in child tax credit payments in there as well. When we saw the child tax credit payments go through, this was part of an omnibus bill, which means there's a lot of other parts. People voted for other things and they weren't really, keen on the child tax credit payments. The same thing happened with stimulus checks. Okay, so plan on no stimulus checks anymore. And the reason for this is simple. Speaker Mike Johnson is saying that before, the Senate would try to jam the House and force an omnibus spending bill. We're not doing that here anymore. We're having single subject bills in our separate appropriations bills. Which means if it's a single subject bill, and this is not just for the government funding bill, but for everything, that means we can't put a thing like funding for Israel together with funding for Ukraine, because people that are going to vote for Israel are going to say no to Ukraine. But Democrats want to put those together because it makes it easier. Then those people, those lawmakers, have to say either no to both, or they say yes to both, not yes to one and no to the other. So again, brings up the question, well, how are we actually going to get a government funding bill? What's it going to look like? Well, that's where things are going to get tricky, because according to many reports, Speaker Mike Johnson, he is insisting that we would cut the government funding bill or funding is going to lapse. So if we are going to pass additional legislation for Ukraine or for Israel or for Social Security or for whatever, okay, it doesn't matter. We are either going to see the funding bill lapse, which means the government will shut down come November 18th, or we have to cut spending. And multiple reports are now saying that the Republican plan is going to cut the government spending bill by 8%. Democrats already say this is a non-starter. The White House has said this as well. However, this might be the only way forward. We also know that Republicans are saying that $60 billion for Ukraine is too much. They would negotiate that. They would bring that down. But by negotiating the money going to Ukraine, it's actually going to take that money out of the government funding bill, which means if there's a cut to SNAP benefits, that there's a cut to, it's not going to be one to Social Security, not going to be one to Medicare. But if there's a cut to, let's see, IRS funding, it could be to the Department of Education, right? So many different things here. Could be to the defense budget as well. I highly doubt it, but it could, especially when we are on the verge of potentially going to a war. I don't see us cutting the defense budget. If anything, it's going to go up. And if that goes up and our cap for our government funding bill is $1.59 trillion, the only thing that we can do is cut everything else so our defense budget can go up. So just be aware, these things are happening. So it doesn't matter that middle-class households are struggling to pay their bills. It doesn't matter that low-income earners can't afford to put food on the table because rent and mortgages are just so high. It doesn't matter about that anymore. What matters is there's a potential chance for a war or an ongoing fight with the Middle East. So because of that, Congress has to be well aware that if they don't have the money, they're going to have to cut other programs in order to find the money. Again, it's a major problem. But here's what we do know. What we are now hearing is that there's a chance our government funding bill could either go to January 15th, which pushes it all the way into the next year, or could actually go into April. And if it goes into April, Republicans say they're open to this idea. Democrats don't like it, but Republicans say we can keep government funding as is until April. But they will give Democrats something in return. As to what that is, we don't know just yet, but we know the House will be back in session later on this week. Once they come back, once they give us updates as to where they stand, how the negotiations are going, I promise I'll fill you in on all the latest news and updates, but that is what we know at this time. So again, thank you guys for watching. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the next one.